Salve te omnes, and welcome back. In this video, we are going to be coming to the end of Aeneid Book 6 as we read through lines 847 to 899, translating it into English, going over some grammar and stylistic devices, and encountering a lot of esoteric Roman history that was probably terribly fascinating 2,000 years ago, but today can be, frankly, a bit of a chore. Regardless, we will do our best, but first, as always, let's review our color coding. Anything that you see in red is indicating a subject, words showing up in green are verbs, and anything in blue is acting as an object. So, with that out of the way, let's get into it. After getting the grand tour of Elysium from his father and seeing the entire scope of Roman history, much of which has yet to happen, let's not get too wrapped up in the timey-wimey things Virgil is doing here, we pick up at lines 847 and following, one of the most blazingly patriotic passages that Virgil or any author ever wrote. Virgil here in these lines is speaking as much to us, his Roman audience, as Anchises is speaking to his son Aeneas. And in case you doubt that, the extended apostrophe beginning in line 851 should remove all doubt. So let's begin. Excudent alii. Other people will carve out. Please note all of these verbs are going to be in the future tense because Anchises is describing things that have yet to happen. So other people will carve, cut out, or fashion spirantia mollius aera, bronze, breathing bronze, more softly or skillfully. Mollius here is actually a comparative adverb with excudent. Cred equidem, he continues, being a kind of authorial insert here almost, Virgil speaking practically in his own voice. Indeed, I believe it. Vi vos ducente marmore vultus. Others, implied again, we're going to be working with this alii a lot for these lines. Others will lead out or bring forth living faces from marble. So here we're talking about sculpture, likewise up here with the spirantia aera, sculpting in bronze or sculpting in marble. In the next line, orabunt causas melius. Others, again, will plead cases better, another comparative adverb. Orare causas is a bit of an idiom for arguing a case in court. Caelique meatus describent radiet surgentia sidera dicent. Here we have two things that are essentially describing the same action. We have people, others, who will describe or mark out the passage of the heavens, meatus, from that verb meo meare, that means to wander or to go. So others will mark out the movements of the heavens with a compass or a measure or something like that. And still others, or perhaps the same others, will speak or describe the surgentia sidera, the rising stars. So in these two lines, we are talking about astronomy, probably mixed in with a hefty dose of what we might consider astrology. And now, as we move down, we come to the direct address, the point at which Virgil, through the character of Anchises, really stops speaking to Aeneas and begins addressing us, his audience, directly. Tu, reger imperio populos. So you, something about this infinitive here, ruling with power, with imperium, the peoples, populos. And then again, confirmed vocative Romane. So at this point, we are basically speaking to our audience, you, O Roman, and then memento, which is the imperative form of the verb memini, meminisse, to remember. So you, Roman man, remember to rule the peoples, to rule over people with imperium, hae tiberunt artes, again, direct address to us, the audience. These things for you will be skills. So these will be your skills. Dative, kind of a possessive dative, most likely. Pacisquim ponere morem. Still with memento for these infinitives. Remember to impose, literally just imponere, impose, the custom of peace. Very interesting little cultural bit here that we're seeing just in these three words. Pacisquim ponere morem. The Romans and the Greeks very much considered the idea of peace to be something that must be forced upon people. You have to imponere the habit or custom of peace, because if left to their own devices, people will probably revert to being violent. They will revert to war. So Romans must teach people the habit of being peaceful. And this next line really, in my opinion, sums up what the Roman attitude towards imposing the habit of peace is. Parcere subjectis et debellare superbos. Remember, Roman, to show mercy to the conquered, to spare the defeated, and to literally throw down in war. Bellare, to war against, and then de, downward, down from. So to cast down in war, to humble the proud, the haughty, superbos. No doubt every Roman in the audience, upon hearing these lines, just puffed up a bit with pride. Okay, continuing on, coming off of that high point, we come now to the beginning of one of the most blatantly propagandistic portions of the entire poem, while also, at the same time, being one of the most lovely. A little bit of backstory before we begin. The tale is told that this particular portion, Book 6, and this particular speech, was completed relatively early in the composition of the Aeneid, and Virgil himself recited it to the Emperor Augustus and his sister Octavia, who fainted for grief upon hearing it. Apparently, Virgil was handsomely rewarded for having written something so moving. Sadly, to us, it does require a great deal of attention and patience for effusive praise and lengthy lamentation and extremely convoluted style concerning people who are little more than just names on a page to us. But to Octavia and to Augustus, the young man that we are going to be talking about here, whose name is Marcellus, was someone of great import to them, and we will explain more about why when we get there. For right now, though, please note, this Marcellus is not the Marcellus we're talking about. He's just someone awesome who happens to have the same name, but we'll see how Virgil weaves that into his story. So let's begin. Sic pater Anchises. Thus, Father Anchises, we understand, spoke, or something like that, because he's just finished his initial speech about the awesomeness that will be Rome. At quaec mirantibus addit, and he adds these things. Again, haec is looking downward towards what's coming, not backwards towards what's already been said. So he adds these things for, or really to, but probably for the ones marveling. Mirantibus here referring to Aeneas and the Sibyl, who are listening to this great speech. So Anchises begins, speaking to them both. Aspice. Don't worry about the singular imperative. Let's just assume he's speaking to his son. Aspice ut insignis spoliis Marcellus opimis. So we see someone, right? We are told to behold. We are told to look. We don't know how the ut translates yet, but if we just glance ahead for a second, ingreditur is an indicative verb, so we know that ut is temporal. As, probably. Behold as, and then we see someone who is renowned. We should be used to this word by now in the Aeneid, because it frequently refers to Aeneas. Someone who is renowned. And then in this next line, we see who it is, Marcellus, right? We see the interlocked word order that's going on here with insignis Marcellis spoliis optimis. And then we have to talk about what exactly the spolia opima are, because these are the things that Marcellus is renowned for. The spolia opima are the arms, the weapons, and any other booty, any other loot taken from a defeated enemy general whom the Roman commander, the commander of the legions, slew with his own hands. Those are the conditions for something to qualify as spolia opima. Apparently, this happened a grand total of 3 times in Roman history, with this older Marcellus being the last one ever to do it. Anyway, we see him now, ingreditur, he is striding forth, and then, unsurprisingly, victorque viros supereminet omnis. As a winner, as a victor, he towers over all other men, or just over all men. This passage, by the way, particularly the second half of the line, should perhaps remind us of Dido in Book 1 being compared to Diana in that simile. Diana likewise supereminet, in that case omnes deas. And so here again we see these echoes of Marcellus being compared, as Dido was, to a divine creature. Anyway, let's leave his divinity behind as we scroll forward to look at what exactly Marcellus did that was so amazing. Hic, not hic here, but actually just hic, the demonstrative pronoun he. Hic rem Romanam magno turbante tumultu. So he did something pertaining to the rem Romanum, which we're just going to understand as if it were rem publicum, the Roman state, the Roman affair, right? So the Roman state, he did something to the Roman state. Magno turbante tumultu, an ablative absolute here referring to the war in which Marcellus fought, literally translated something like with a great uprising or tumult raging, something like that. Systeteques, so this is Marcellus again, hic. He was an eques, gives us a sense of his status in Roman society, and he sistet. He sustained or supported or saved the rem Romanum. And how did he do that? Sternet poinos galumque rebellem. He laid low the Phoenicians, we know about them, and the Gallum rebellem. So in this case, kind of both collective, referring to Gaul being in uproar, being in revolt, but also particularly the man whom Marcellus was supposed to have conquered, the enemy general, the enemy commander, a man named Viridomarus. This is the rebellum, the man leading the uprising that Marcellus lay low, and then tertia quarma patri suspendet capta Quirino. He was able to hang the third captured weapons. Again, tertia here referring back to that spolia opima. Marcellus was the third one and the last one ever to do it, and he was able to hang those arms, those captured arms, captured for the third time, we might say. 2 or 4, this is for whom or to whom he is dedicating, which is what suspended really comes to mean. To whom Marcellus is dedicating these captured arms, he is dedicating them to Patri Quirino, Father Quirinus. And Quirinus, maybe some of you recall, Quirinus is another name for Romulus. So he has dedicated the arms to the founder of Rome. The hanging of the armor, by the way, in a temple, it refers to sanctifying the arms and offering them as a dedication for everyone to see as proof of the glory of Rome and as a tribute to the god or goddess upon, with whose help the Romans were able to be victorious. And with this, we finish the story of Marcellus the Old, the awesome one. Okay, and now at quic, and here, this is hic, not hic, here, Aeneas notices something and asks a question. At quic Aeneas, and so now Aeneas, and so here Aeneas, una nam quire videbat, for, don't worry about the parentheses, that's just a modern editorial convention, for he saw something, and we can assume it's a person because he saw someone going una. The A here in una is long, so we know that it's the adverb form, meaning along with or together with. And then this next line is the one he saw. Please note that these accusatives, egregium juvenem, are being marked as subjects because after we debat, we're going to go ahead and read this as if it were indirect speech. He saw that someone egregium forma, someone incredible or outstanding, distinguished in respect to his appearance. A juvenem, a young man, this is very important. Et fulgentibus armis, this is going back with egregium. So he is egregium, he is distinguished in respect to both his physical appearance, so we might say his beauty or his handsomeness, and the gleaming arms that he bears. These are the two things that make him egregium. We see that he is a juvenem, which means really not much more than 20. Sed frons laeta parum. All right, so we see his front, literally his forehead, but by extension his face. His front is laeta parum. This word parum is a great adverb. It's basically a way to say something like not too much, or only a little, or less than. So his front, it's a very convoluted, from our perspective, not being native Latin speakers, it's a very convoluted litotes. His front is definitely not happy. It is less than happy, but it's not sad, right? Because that's how litotes work. It's not a tristis front. It's just a laeta parum. Why would he be laeta, you ask? Well, I mean, look at this previous line. He is egregium forma in fulgentibus armis. If you were egregium forma in fulgentibus armis, you'd be laeta, at least to some degree, most of the time too. But he's not laeta enough. He's lacking in happiness, his front is. Et dejecto lumina vultu, and his eyes are in a downcast face or expression. Again, lumina in poetry almost never being lamps, pretty much always being eyes. Okay, so let's move on now, because Aeneas has a question when he sees this young man who really should be the talk of the town, but just appears a little bit sad. Quis, pater, ille? Who, this is simple enough, right? Who, father, is that man? And then we go on. Virumque sic comitatur euntem. The one who is marching alongside, is accompanying thus the man who is going. Now, this virum euntem, this is older Marcellus. This is the Marcellus we just saw. This younger man is comitaturing him. He is accompanying him as a comes, as an ally or comrade. The logical follow-up is filius. Is he his son? Analiquis, or perhaps someone else. This ane, by the way, it's actually two words, right? We split it right here. It's the interrogative on, which means something like or, and then ne, which is just the question mark, right? So is he his son, or perhaps someone else? Magna de stirpe nepotum, from de, the great lineage of his descendants, something like that. All right, so is he his son or perhaps otherwise related to him? Qui strepitus circa comitum. We see that there are no verbs in this line, so what do? Of course, we add our est. Qui strepitus comitum, this is a genitive plural going with strepitus, something like what a commotion of comrades, what a noise or gathering of comrades, and then circa, the adverb, all around him. Same kind of thing here. Quant instar in ipso. Instar is an indeclinable word, so watch out. It's read as neuter, which is why quantum. How great a dignity, something like that, a dignity of value and amazingness. How great a dignity est there is in ipso, in that man himself. He's just the greatest. Sed nox atra caput. So we see, just like in the cartoons, we see Black Knight and then something about his head. So perhaps we've all seen those cartoons where the sad or dejected character has the thundercloud that's following only him. Sure enough, that's exactly what Virgil's after. He must have known his Looney Tunes. Sed nox atra caput tristi circum volat umbra. So we see that Black Knight is flying around his head in, we might say, or with, a sad cloud. Okay, and now we embark on the passage that is often referred to as the Eulogy for Marcellus, Augustus's appointed heir who died young, and, if you believe some of the later historians, in very suspicious circumstances. It goes on for 18 lines, so strap in. Tum pater Anchises, then father Anchises, lacrimis ingressus abortis. So the ingressus here, which is missing the est, is simply literally he embarks upon, he steps forward, something like that. This is referring to him speaking with lacrimis abortis, with tears having risen up. Probably just an ablative absolute right here. Lacrimis abortis could also be construed as an ablative of manner, right? As he begins to cry, he begins thus. Ognat ingentem luctum ne quaere tuorum. So he speaks to his son here. Ognate, O child of mine. Ingentem luctum, this huge grief. And then we see again this ne with quaere, the imperative, which should be noli quaerere, but it's poetry, so we just use ne with the imperative and make it a negative imperative. Do not seek, do not ask about, we would say, the huge grief, and then we jump to tuorum, of your people, of your race. That is to say, not just of your family, because remember, Augustus claimed direct descent from Aeneas, so this tuorum is referring to literally Aeneas's family. Aeneas is seeing a great, continue on until you're done, great-grandson of his. But also we're speaking here of the people of Rome, because that's going to be the theme here, is that with the death of Marcellus, the glory of Rome essentially died with him. So do not seek to know, do not ask about the great grief of your people. And then we move into a more abstract statement here. Ostendent terris hunc tantum fata nec ultra. So the fates will reveal, we're still doing this future tense thing for events that have already happened. The fates will reveal this man, this hunc here, to the earth. Kind of a dative here with ostendent. The fates will reveal this man to the earth tantum, as an adverb. Only so much, or something like that. Nec ultra, and not any further, esse sinent. Will the fate, still the subject, permit him to exist? So fate is only going to allow this person, whoever he is, we will learn, to exist for a set amount of time, tantum, and not any further. And this is a reference to the fact that Marcellus, the young Marcellus, the one who we're talking about, died at the age of 19. Okay, as we move on, let's scroll down here and get the rest of it as much as we can onto the screen. Nimium vobis Romana propago visa potens superi. So let's take just a quick note that we are now referring to the superi. We are speaking to the gods here. So when we say vobis, that is the gods themselves. So, oh gods above, right? Superi, ones above. The Romana propago, the race, or the propagation, the people of Rome would seem, or perhaps would have seemed, because see, we understand there's an esset here. The reason that we understand that, this is very advanced stuff here. The reason that we understand that is because of the fuisent down here. This pluperfect subjunctive tells us that we are talking about contrary to fact statements. So it's not that the Roman people seem, because that's not actually the case. The Roman people would have seemed, visa esset, potens, nimium potens. The nimium here is going to go with the potens. Excessively powerful to you, right? So, oh gods, basically, we might say it in English, you would have considered the Roman people to be too powerful. But Virgil does it the other way. The Roman people would have seemed excessively powerful to y'all, to you, if propri haec si dona fuisent, if haec dona, these gifts, which is basically probably to say something like the fact that Marcellus even existed, fuisent propria, had been appropriate or proper or something like that. So in other words, if the gods had even just allowed Marcellus to go on living, it almost would have made Rome greater than they were meant to be according to fate. So therefore the gods had to take him away, because otherwise Rome would have burst all bounds of modesty. Who knows? Okay, so let's jump down here to the next bit. Quantos ille virum. So we see the something, maybe the man, don't really know. We see quantos, and then we see virum. So something about, this is almost certainly virorum when we see it, because we see quantos right here, right? And we see quantos, and we see that ending, and oh gosh, that is accusative plural. So then I get to virum, and I say to myself, wait a second, another accusative? No. That's how I know, without having to do the whole line and a half and put everything together, that's how I can reasonably assume, and it turns out that we're right most of the time, that this virum is actually the syncopated virorum. All right, so when we get to this whole thing, so this leaves us a little bit in ambiguity. We don't know exactly what we're talking about yet, but then we see magna mavortis ad urbem. Okay, so this makes more sense. Now we see the great city of Mars. Well, that's Rome. Okay, so something about the great city of Mars. Then we get to the next line and everything resolves itself. Campus aget gemitus. There's a potential here, if you want to. When we hit campus and we just read mavortis, there's a chance here that we might say to ourselves, the Campus Martius, because that would be appropriate. The Campus Martius was the region, the field of Mars, that was still, even in Augustus's time, largely outside of the city, and it was the place where people of wealth and importance were buried. There were a number of mausoleums there, including ultimately the mausoleum of Augustus himself and his family. So we might read Mavortis with campus, but it probably, given its position, goes with urbem. That's fine. I just appreciate what Virgil's doing with the Mavortis and its ambiguity. So we do see, though, that the campus, which is the Campus Martius, is going to do, or we might say make or echo with, who knows, is going to give so many groans, quantos gemitus, fourth declension word, so this is accusative plural, going with quantos, of men. So we take quantos, we jump to gemitus, and then from gemitus it points us up to virorum. So many groans of men the campus is going to make or give to the great city of Mars, to Rome, because again, the Campus Martius is outside the city, so therefore it would direct its lamentations towards the city. Well, quae, or what, like what something, right? We don't know, neuter plural. Tiberine, here we see the vocative. Now in this case, it's the river Tiber. Videbis, you will see. So here we have an apostrophe. We are speaking to the Tiber River as if it were an actual person who could hear us and who's present right now. So it's an apostrophe. O Tiber, you will see quae funera, such, we might say, funeral rites or rituals, things like that. Cum tumulum praeter labere recentem. When, because praeter labere, although it doesn't look it, we'll break this down in a second, this is actually an indicative verb. So we know that the cum has to be read as when. When you glide on by, praeter meaning to go past, labere from labor, not to work, but the verb labor labi lapsus meaning to slip or to slide. And what does a river do? It glides. So, O Tiber, you will see such funeral celebrations when you glide by the fresh tomb, a tumulum referring to a tomb or a mound that would be erected over a tomb to mark it. Praeter labere, really fast. This is one of those alternate endings that is ere, but it's not, as we most often see, most of the time, a replacement for erunt, the third person plural perfect ending. Instead, this is an alternative ending for the second person future passive voice, or deponent in this case, where the normal ending should be eris, because Latin was already not confusing at all, and this just makes it so much easier. But that's what's going on right here. Okay, let's scroll on down. Now the next lines here continue the very complex and artful interlocking word order that we've been seeing, as well as hyperbaton and all of Virgil's art on display. So I do beg your pardon if we kind of march through this one a little bit more quickly. So we see puer quisquam, we see nec puer quisquam, no other boy. And then we see Iliaca gente, de Iliaca gente, from the Trojan race, because again, Marcellus is descended, according to the propaganda, directly from Aeneas, therefore he is Trojan. Latinos in tantum spe tollet avos. So Latinos and avos obviously goes together. No other boy from the Trojan race will raise up, will lift up his Latin ancestors in tantum, to such a degree or to such an extent, spe, by means of the hope or promise he possesses. And this is referring to the Roman opinion that in order to be great, it not only helped if you came from great men, great ancestry, but you would also have to do your own part to show how amazing you were. Marcellus was so incredible that no one else has ever elevated both himself and therefore also his ancestors in such a way as this. Continuing on, nec Romula quondam, ulo se tantum telus jactabit alumno, nor will the Romana tellus, because those obviously go together, nor will the land of Rome jactabit se, something like boast. All right, we've seen jactat se, we've seen this idiom, we saw it in Book 1, when Neptune is telling the winds that Aeolus should se jactet, he should bounce himself around or boast or be all puffed up and important in his own halls. So in this case, same thing, nor will the Roman land boast ever, quondam, right, at any point in time, so much, tantum, just being adverbial here, ulo alumno, on account of or because of such and alumnus, which basically here means child. All right, so Rome will never again bring forth a citizen, a Roman, who will bring such pride and glory and just general awesomeness to the universe. Okay, well, having spoken of the awesomeness that Marcellus was going to bring to the universe, now it is time in these next lines to lament for its loss. So, heu pietas, alas for pietas, right? I guess it's gone now. Heu prisca fides in victaque bello dextera, alas as well for ancient faith, or old-fashioned morals, we might say. Who knows? That would be a very Augustan way to read this, by the way. Old-fashioned morals, something that Augustus was very keen on promoting. In victaque bello dextera, and the right hand that was unconquered in war. Let's remember, by the way, that Marcellus was 19. Non illice quisquimpu ne tulicet. So here's quisquam, no one at all, se tulicet, would bear himself, illi, against him. Now this illi, this is Marcellus. This quisquam, this someone else, is anyone who would have challenged Marcellus. So no one at all would carry himself against that man, okay, against Marcellus, impune, with impunity, in other words, without suffering the consequences. And then obvius armato, the obvious, obviously going with the quisquam, something like face to face or in his path. And then armato referring to illi, which is Marcellus, armed. So the idea is apparently that this young man won every fight that he was ever in because, of course he did, he's Marcellus. And then we get two instances of when this might have happened. Seu cum pedes iret in hostem. We've flipped it back here a little bit. The pedes is now Marcellus. All right, so up here in this first part, illi was Marcellus and no enemy would come against him with impunity. But down here, the pedes is Marcellus. So whether when Marcellus would go against the enemy on foot, pedes, or when Marcellus would drive the flanks or sides, that's armos, of, we have to jump all the way back to spumantis equi, of his foaming horse. The horse is foaming because it's excited, it's been running hard, it's frothing at the mouth, with calcaribus, an ablative of instrument, with his spurs. So just to be clear, yes, you spur on a horse with spurs. You spur the flanks of the animal with spurs. Okay, moving on and continuing the general theme of lamentation. There we go. Heu miserande puer, alas. And this is a vocative, by the way, which is why it's not indicated with any color. Boy who must be pitied. Yes, miserande is a gerundive in the vocative case. So he is a boy that we all must pity, we all must lament for. Si qua fat aspera rumpas. So we see the si qua. We know that si, after si nisi numene, ali takes a holiday. So this is ali qua. But this is not qua with fata. This is si qua, because the a scans long. Basically something like si ali qua, maybe via, if somehow, if in some way. Fata aspera is the object here because rumpas, we are speaking now to the young man who's not here. It's the most incredible apostrophe of all time. If perhaps you could break the harsh fates implied that bind you, tu Marcellus eris, you will be Marcellus. And this is the point right here, this line. As soon as Virgil said these words, apparently, Octavia, Augustus's sister, the mother of Marcellus, fainted. I know for my part, I'm about done with this passage myself. But we're going to get there together. So here we go. With the next part that's coming, we get a little bit more practical now as we come to the end, and very funereal. Manibus date lilia plenis. So the command goes out at first, date to everyone. Give lilies with plenis manibus, with full hands. And then in this next line, and the one following, we shift to first-person verbs. Okay, so I, which of course Anchises is speaking, but we might as well again read this, understand this as if it's Virgil himself. Purpureos spargam flores animamque nepotis. I shall sprinkle purple flowers, Purple, of course, being a very notable and regal color, right? Animamque nepotis his alta cumulem donis. And I shall accumulem, I shall at the very least, saltem, right, this adverb, I shall at least honor, I shall heap up, I shall glorify the spirit, specifically feminine, so we're going to say spirit, of my descendant, of my relation, of the one that I am related to, his donis, by means of these gifts. The gifts would be the flowers, of course, but also, to be fair, the duty of giving the flowers, because we see that here in the next line with munere. And I shall fungar, I shall fulfill or complete this inani munere. We see that inani munere is marked as ablative because fungar is from fungor, which is one of those puff V verbs that takes the ablative instead of an accusative. I shall fulfill this empty, this vacant obligation. Why is it an empty duty? Who knows? Perhaps it's because in the end, maybe the dead can't sense what we do for them, but we're still going to do it, as Virgil here says through Anchises' voice. We're still going to do it anyway. We're going to sprinkle the flowers, we're going to honor the soul of the departed, and we're going to fulfill our responsibilities, even if it be empty. It is a very sad scene. And with it now, we're done, and everything kind of wraps itself up very quickly. Sic tota passim regione vagantur. We just drop everything and get on with business. Thus, this way and that, passim, they wander, tota regione, over the whole region, we might say. It's just an ablative of place where. Aeris in campis latis, at quomnia lustran. So they wander in the latis campis, the wide fields, aeris, of air, which might just refer to the fact that Elysium is perhaps the least dreary of the regions of the underworld. Atque omnia lustrant, and they survey or they look over all the things. Okay, for this next bit here, then we move on to quae post quancaesis natum per singula duxit. So first note is that this quae right here is referring to the omnia in the previous line. It's not on the screen anymore, but it's there in the previous line, the omnia. All the things we might say which, but it's really just referring back to the omnia, and the quae is not marked with anything because it's actually going with the singula. So after, we would say, Anchises had led his son through all these things, which, because the quae is referring to the omnia, through all these things singula, one by one, or one at a time. Incendit quanimum, and he kindled or fired his mind, we could say soul, famae venientis amore, with a love for, and then famae venientis, the fame or glory or honor that was coming. Famae venientis, by the way, being an objective genitive, just like the one we saw earlier in Book 6, where the souls had an amore ripae ulterioris, for the further shore, an objective genitive here, the object of the love. Exim bella viro memorat, quae dende gerenda. And then, exim, he brought to mind for the man, reminded the man, but he put the man in mind of the bella, bella being the object of memorat, the wars, quae, which is the bella, right, in the relative, quae dende gerenda, which then would have to be fought. There's a sunt missing here. The wars that would have to be fought. And, scroll down a little bit more, laurentisque docet populos, urbemque Latini. So he taught his son, he teaches his son. All these verbs are in the present tense because Anchises is doing this right here, right now. He teaches his son about, we would say, the Laurentes populos, the people of Laurentium, so the people living in Italy at the time, and urbem Latini, and the city of King Latinus, which will be very important, et quoquemque modo. Now this is interesting here. The quo and the modo go together. They've been separated by timesis, where we split the word up. And how, and then the quemque is going to end up going with the laborem, which we can only understand after we've done fugiatque feratque. So he teaches his son how, quo modo, he should both flee from and also endure each laborem, because remember, we're going over omnia, we're going over everything. So Anchises is telling Aeneas exactly what's going to happen, the various peoples he's going to meet, and which challenges, labores, he should flee from and endure. So put up with or tolerate or prepare himself to fight. Now, one thing that's particularly interesting about this, and the reason I want you to pay particular attention to it before we get to the very conclusion of the book, of this passage that we're reading, is that Aeneas has just gotten a crash course from his father about everything he's going to have to do and every trial he's going to have to face in order to complete his quest. And for the remaining 6 books of this epic, Aeneas displays exactly 0 awareness that he has any clue what's about to happen or any idea about what the best course of action would be for him to take. So either Virgil fell victim to a massive plot hole that you could drive a quadriga through, or this next and concluding passage carries with it a ton of subtext. So let's get on to that final fateful passage. One of the best known passages from the entire Aeneid, and you'll see why. Sunt geminae somni portae. There are, because when sunt or est is the first word of a sentence, we almost always read it as there is or there are. There are twin gates, geminae portae, of sleep, that is to say the god sleep. Quaral terrafertur, of which, talking about the portae, of which one of the two, because remember alter means one of two, one of the two fertur, this is the impersonal form of the verb, there's an essay being understood, is said to be. So of the 2 gates, one of them is said to be cornea, made of horn, animal horn. Qua veris facilis datur exitus umbris, through which, or by means of which, we see a lot of chiasmus happening here, with veris going with umbris and facilis going with exitus. We see that a easy departure is given to, because is given, so indirect object, true dreams or true shades. So any shade that passes through the gate of horn is a true shade. Altera, here's the other of the portae, candenti perfecta nitens elephanto. So again, we see the chiasmus, candenti elephanto, right, there and there, with perfecta nitens. So the other one is perfecta. It is made, but it's not just made, it is perfected, it's finished, it's completed, and it is gleaming, nitens, with, we would say, candenti elephanto, shining white ivory. Sed fals ad caelum mittunt insomnia manes. And here we see that the manes, which are the spirits of the underworld, or the underworld itself, because it's used both ways, send false insomnia, false dreams to the sky or the upper world, right? Because dreams are seen as being sent by the gods. And so apparently there's 2 ways that these dreams can make it to us, either through the gate of horn or the gate of ivory. So as we scroll down then to the conclusion, his epitum natan caesis unaque sibillam prosequitur dictis. So his and dictis are going together with these words, that is to say the words that he has just said to his son, then to this place, which would be the gates, Anchises leads, Anchises prosequitur, natum unaque sibillam, his son, Aeneas, along with, again this adverbial una, along with the Sibyl, porta qui mittit eburna, and he sends them, both natum and sibillam, he sends them through, or by means of, it's really an ablative of means, right, by the path of, he sends them through the ivory gate, which is the one that the fake dreams go through. So what does that mean? Ille viam secat, and he, Aeneas, because ille indicates the subject change, so Aeneas, viam secat, literally he cuts the road, so he goes on the path, ad naves, back to his boats, sociosque revisit, and he sees his friends again. Right? He beholds his comrades once again. So, after all of that, Aeneas is sent back to the real world through the gate of false dreams. And believe me, a lot of ink has been spilled over the last 2,000 years contemplating what exactly Virgil meant by that. And that brings us to the end. And not just the end of this video, where I would normally invite you to look ahead to the next, but technically the end of the AP Latin syllabus for us. Regardless of how long you've been on this journey with me, I appreciate your time and attention, and I sincerely hope that these videos have been a boon and an aid to you. I thank you for watching them, and I hope that you've enjoyed them and will pass them on. Regardless of this being the end, I will leave you as I always do by saying, Maximus gratias vobis omnibus ago, et valete omnes.